Hello, my name is Neil Potter, and I have been a coach and consultant to software organizations for over 30 years and a coach to Agile teams since the year 2000. This video series is about going beyond the basics of Agile software development. In this video, I will discuss how to adopt various standards and frameworks such as ISO 9001, the PMI Body of Knowledge, and the Capability Maturity Model while using Agile. Please click below to subscribe for future videos. Agile teams are often asked to adopt standards and frameworks such as ISO, PMBOK, and CMMI. These standards can look overwhelming, so in this video I will summarize them and show how they can be used together. In this video, we'll discuss a summary of PMBOK, CMMI, Scrum, and ISO 9001, a summary of the differences at a high level, the bigger goal, by that I mean the context that you live in, why are we doing these practices, a more detailed comparison, and a summary. So let's start with a summary of each of the frameworks and standards and see what they actually contain. Before I do that, I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that they all ask for the same thing, but different words, a different focus, and a different language. And so my analogy here is like a fire escape plan in a hotel. Now, I have traveled to China many times, and in almost every hotel, there will be a fire escape map nailed to the door of the hotel. If you read it, you can understand it, but the language it uses is going to be different. And that will be true for each of the particular documents we're going to look at today. So I think this is kind of funny. Please don't worry if fire is occurring. This cabaret have owned secure scattering facilities to assure you transmitted safely. Please follow the direction route to the information corridor, and their safeguards will take you to the security area. Red point is your position. So we understand what it means, but every particular version of this will be a different set of words. Firstly, PMBOK. PMBOK is a body of knowledge. It is a document that describes really a definition of project management practices in quite a bit of depth. The individual would study this and take an exam to become PMI certified, and there will be continuing education to prove a level of continuance in the use of those practices. But really it's up to the individual to use them or not use them in their work. On the right hand side, you can see the sections of the PMBOK. It starts at number 4 because the first 3 are introductory in nature, and it covers pretty much the gamut of PM practices. The CMMI is a 5-level roadmap where you can start off at level 1, level 0 at the very bottom, and then progress over time to a high level of maturity or process maturity. Level 1 is like an amorphous blob. The project starts on the far left hand of the picture. The team does their best to do the work and finish. In the middle, they don't really know where they are. They know they're busy and they're trying very hard. But are they 2/3 finished? Do they need 2 more weeks? Do they need a month? Do they need another day? To know where they are would take a while to figure it out. So they're typically going to put heads down and they keep on going. And then when money stops, then the end of the output on the far right. And to know the status of the team at any particular point takes a lot of time because there's really no tracking of what was done, what was not done, where we stand, etc. And therefore just a very ambiguous, amorphous blob. Level 2 is where we define the basic PM practices. We plan the work out, we allocate time for the work, we manage change, and we know overall the status of our project and the status of our quality of our project, like defect levels, etc. So as we do these things in level 2, we get a better result on the far right hand side, less risk and less rework. So really the litmus test is that as we mature our processes and our practices, we get a better result over time. Level 2 could be described by these yellow boxes where the work is broken up into recognizable and visible areas. So the yellow boxes are the way you do your work chunk. It could be an iteration or a phase or a particular area of work you're doing. And the green circles would be the visibility points to know where you stand after a duration of time, maybe 2 weeks or a month. So customer requirements and what products are managed. Basic PM practices have been established. PM practices allow visibility on defined occasions, which are the green circles. That's a fairly quick update about where we stand. And because there's visibility, the problems of the projects are known about and can be shared with management, and therefore management reacts to problems as they occur. Whereas at level 1, they may have no idea about problems as they're occurring. They're going to find out third hand very late in the game, typically when it's too late to react. Level 3, we have in blue more advanced PM practices again. In green, the teams are able to learn about what is going right, what is not going so well, collect that together across the teams, and then improve the whole organization. And then in red, we have the engineering activities where teams learn how to build better systems, better tested, better designed, better integrated, etc. And when they deliver a product, it actually works. Scrum is a simplified project management framework. It has a backlog activity, like the requirements, release planning, sprint planning, where you're planning the details maybe 2 weeks out, a test activity, sprint review or demonstration, so you're getting feedback from your customers on what you built, because they may not like or like what you have done, getting early feedback, and a retrospective. The team is looking for lessons learned in the team so they can improve performance next time. On the far right part of the diagram, we have the product backlog again, so we can revisit that. It may have changed. We pick out new work off that backlog. We go through sprint planning, the iteration, test, release, etc., and get feedback again on our second piece of work. So that's a recurring theme of activities that we go through for Agile. On the top right-hand part of the picture, we have a task board, and that kind of shows us our status of where we are by task and by person. And then on the bottom right, we have our burn down chart that kind of shows work progress over time. So if we have a certain number of points of work to complete, and as those things are complete, we can check them off, and the chart burns down to 0 by the end of the sprint. ISO 9001, as I said before, is really a very high-level standard of the whole set of processes. And so typically people would define a QMS, a quality management system, like a set of policies and guidelines for how they're going to run their business. And there will be an ISO audit, typically by an external auditor, to kind of show where you are. So if you look at the far right-hand picture here, we have the sections of ISO standard. Again, it starts at number 4 because of this introductory material in the first 3 sections, and they cover the gamut of topic areas at a very, very high level in the organization. Now, if you look at a little comparison of some of these things, on the left, we have PMBOK, individual focused exam of a knowledgeable person and a continuing education. In the second diagram, the CMMI, that is a bigger collection of PM practices and engineering practices and improvement. So a little bit broader again and deeper than PMBOK, but very similar. We have an appraisal to kind of show what has been implemented with a degree of mastery. So appraisals are very in-depth checks on how people are doing their practices correctly, typically by interviews and artifact review. And then the appraisal rating, like level 2 or level 3 rating, is then renewed every 2 or 3 years. And there's some choices about what appraisal type they pick to kind of bump out or renew their rating. Then we have Scrum in the yellow boxes, which is a simple PM framework for organizing and planning work and getting feedback. Typically, the Scrum Master and Product Owner, which are 2 key roles, they go to a 2-day course or 1-day course. They take a test at the end, and they are qualified as a Scrum Master or Product Owner. On the far right, we have ISO 9001, where the company implements a set of their instructions or their work practices, and they get an audit done by an external entity to prove the ISO 9001. Now, I mentioned in the agenda focusing on a bigger goal. All these things can become overwhelming and even academic if they are focused on primarily, like to comply to CMMI or to comply to ISO 9001. And what makes the world of difference is to focus on really your business and your projects and keep that focus throughout. That is, that if the goal is really to meet customer expectations, deliver within agreed constraints, and throughout the project, manage expectations and changes and assess risk and mitigate risk, basically keep the team happy and organized throughout. That is really the goal. The goal is much bigger than just a standard or a document. And so the benefit of this is that you keep your focus on the business to be successful. And secondly, you can then see in the context of that where these other frameworks and practices fit. So firstly, a comparison at a high level. The larger circle is a collection of the 5 levels of CMMI. And then the oval is basically the content of ISO 9001 and or PMBOK. And that is that if you look at ISO 9001 or PMBOK, they typically cover all of level 2 and roughly half of level 3. And there are things at level 4, level 5, and even things at level 3 they don't cover. So there's a good lot of overlap between ISO 9001 and PMBOK and CMMI. If you look at the Scrum idea there, about a half of level 2 is implemented by Scrum, like planning, estimation, tracking, etc., and the burn down charts. And there's a part of level 3 on testing that is done by Scrum too. So Scrum is in there, but it's a subset of the whole picture of the other 2 models. So this picture here is a far more detailed comparison of the sections of PMBOK, CMMI, and ISO. In the left, we have the sections of PMBOK. In the middle, we have the sections or practice areas of CMMI. And the blue items where the words are colored in blue or partially colored in blue are where there's a map or a match between the CMMI and the PMBOK. So, for example, under planning down here, it's all in blue because all of the planning practice area in CMMI is covered by PMBOK and vice versa. If we look in the middle here at Scrum, again, Scrum is a simplified project management framework, and therefore it is a part of level 2 and a little bit of level 3. And therefore it would cover a part of PMBOK also. So you can see out of the diagram that if you are doing Scrum and Agile, there are many more things you could be looking at to improve performance in the team and still maintain Scrum and Agile. So Scrum and Agile is a subset of a bigger population of practices that are defined by ISO, CMMI, and PMBOK. On the right-hand side, we have ISO 9001. Again, this is a high-level standard that covers many areas, and therefore you can see it kind of touches on every topic area pretty much of CMMI and therefore of PMBOK, but at less detail. So if you step back a little bit from the diagram, you can see that you really could achieve all of these standards and frameworks in parallel because there are touch points across the whole model and framework. So I think the key thing here is to recognize, what are we doing this for, and then recognize where these touch points actually are. I would recommend you start with the framework you want. For example, in the middle here, I put the typical steps of an Agile Scrum project. They have a backlog where they put their requirements, where they derive their requirements, user stories. They do planning, which could be like planning poker, setting dates on sprints, and determining kind of a done for the iteration. And the sprints where they go through activities to do the work and end up with a test and a demonstration to the end user to get feedback. Now, if we take that flow to begin with, however you're doing it now, we can take every box and improve upon it a little bit. If we take the backlog box, we can look at RDM, which is requirements, development and management, or even CM, configuration management or version control. And we can improve the way we do the yellow boxes with the practices of RDM and CM. For example, other ways to elicit requirements, other types of requirements to elicit above and beyond the user story, how to analyze requirements, how to validate them, and even looking at some of the PMBOK activities on scoping. If we go to planning, we can start out with a Scrum Agile world of planning poker and story points. We could add to that estimating with historical data, maybe ideal time and labor, program level tracking, program level dependencies, where we can coordinate other teams that are going to work together, even adding risk management to our list too. So we could take our planning box and bit by bit add to it other practices to make planning go better. And then we could take our sprint, maybe improve our requirements analysis activities from RDM, look at design from TS, technical solution, implementation from TS, testing and peer reviews covered partly in VMV, integration and testing or final testing and VMV also. On the top left, we really have some of the green level 2 practices like control, measurement, and CM, supply management, etc. And on the right, we have some level 3 practice areas, better planning, better risk management, training, better improvement focus for process stuff, building an asset library for our checklists and processes, doing design trade-offs, doing peer reviews and verification, and doing root cause analysis. All of these things can be added anywhere in the lifecycle to improve performance again. So a summary way to think about that is that ISO provides a summary process and set of policies at a very high level, and CMMI covers more detailed practices at a process level. Now, if you look at this diagram, you may be tempted or worried even that everything should be a process, like a big document. I recommend that we keep everything very simple, and these boxes here are basically checklists. If we collect together all of the things we do and should be doing or will do soon on requirements, we can make that into a checklist. Maybe how we elicit requirements, the questions we ask, where we write them down, how we analyze the requirements, how we trace the requirements to coding and testing, how we then check the requirements with test cases, how we then manage changes to the requirements. Those can be a one-page checklist. If we look at planning activities, how we scope the project, estimate, track, assess risk, mitigate risk, etc., can be under the category of planning and tracking. And how we do engineering, or the iterations, all of the things you do to do design activity, architecture, interfaces, coding, peer reviews, etc., can be in a checklist style under engineering. And even retrospectives, learning to collect data, both positive and negative, and share that data across the whole organization. So this previous diagram, we could learn conceptually, they fit together very well, but to implement, we could then do it incrementally by these one-page checklists. In summary, PMBOK, CMMI, Scrum, ISO 9001 are after the same things: to have established goals like a project and business level, managed project scope, managed projects, and managed process visibility to know where you stand in a project. But to keep yourself sane as you do all this and not overwhelmed, I would say start with the flow you want to go through. And then from that point, add practices that are useful to you to fix issues you're having now. Lack of test cases, lack of good requirements, different types of requirements, lack of risk management. There are things in the other frameworks which you can quickly add. And then when you get into a state of being overwhelmed or confused or frustrated, just stop, take a pause for a minute, and focus back on the goal of the project and the goal of the business, and then recognize where these things fit. And my last point is that don't put up with bad stuff. It is tempting to write a process, use it, and then not like it, and then feel like you can't change it because you're kind of stuck with it somehow. And I really recommend that you dramatically change things as need be to improve how you perform the project. And if there's a process or a tool or a workflow that doesn't work particularly well or doesn't work anymore, that you take a pause and fix it to really improve how you want it to be going forward. So not all standards are written clearly. This is a notice at the beginning of a cable car ride in northwest Beijing, as you're going to go over the forest and see the colors change. For your save, please obey the staff's uniform command. Please queue to get into the cable car in order. For your save, please don't raise the fence when you take the cable car. Person who is difficult in getting, definitely not me. Has dangerous tendency, not me either. Don't take the cable car. Please don't smoke and throw things. I couldn't throw to save my life. Please don't let your body out of the cable car. I did not do that. When meet cable car, temporary stop. Passengers, don't be scared. Don't jump the cable car. Please obey the staff's uniform command. When the chair arrives at the destination, please raise the fence. For protecting your advantages, they never say what those actually are. Please buy tickets from the station ticket office. I did that. Person who has high blood pressure, not me. Heart disease, I hope not. Or mental illness, I don't think so. And is difficult in getting, definitely not, are forbidden. This guy here is a good example of taking skills, packaging them together, and producing a good result. You may want to go look at the video and take a look. In conclusion, these standards are asking for the same thing, to have projects managed systematically and visibly. The easiest way to use them is to stay focused on the workflow you want and add in practices from the various standards. These additional practices are then used to address current problems and risks. Thanks for watching the video. For more help on these topics or your Agile implementation, please see the links below.